The Arkham series has some of the most interesting, disturbing, and downright baffling details packed into its 6 mainline entries. Yeah, we don't talk about that one. Of any game franchise out there, and these details are one of the many reasons the series has stood the test of time and has a thriving community to this day. So indulge one of the superhero media circle's hyper obsessions for the next 90 minutes, give or take, look, it sounds better than giving an exact time, and sit back, relax, put me over there on the second monitor, and let's delve into 90 minutes of the Arkham series' most unknown facts. One of my favourite video titles ever comes from a video uploaded by my good friend the Atom Smith, and the video was titled "Arkham Origins is just modded Arkham City." Well, he wasn't lying. In any pre-alpha version of WB Montreal's cult classic, if you head right into the character trophy screen, you'll probably find Arkham City's Batman character trophy, but we can go one step further and find that he's also on the Arkham City background with the museum being seen behind him. Obviously this is just a placeholder, but it's still interesting nonetheless. Other examples of Arkham Origins being modded Arkham City are the Hugo Strange or Joker death screens that appear in certain situations, or even the fact that Mr. Free subtitles pop up in early versions of the TN1 Bane fight. This really doesn't mean anything, obviously Arkham City was the base for this game, but it's still quite interesting. A small detail some of you might have missed out on, but one I've found really cool since I noticed it a few years ago. During the scene where Alfred dies and Batman has to bring him back to life using the shock gloves, at points in the cutscene the subtitles will reveal Bruce Wayne talking to Alfred, not Batman. This is a very subtle detail, but one I think drives home one of Arkham Origins' core themes of the man behind the mask being just as important, but sometimes getting lost behind the hardened vigilante, the Batman. During Batman's short but memorable visit to the steel mill to find Roman Sionis, aka the Black Mask, aside from being stalked by a poisonous foe, Batman can come across some old files of assassins who either denied the contract on Batman's head or were cut from the list by Black Joker Mask Sionis. These 3 assassins, as I'm sure you all know, are Cheshire, David Kane, and Black Spider. Now, rather than assuming you have any idea who any of these 3 seemingly D-list villains are, let me give you a little rundown. Cheshire is a pretty niche character who debuted in 1983 and serves as a reoccurring foe of the Teen Titans, as well as being an occasional love interest of Catman and Red Arrow. She's an assassin who doesn't seem to have the same pull as her contemporaries, but seems to be fairly effective. Next up, David Kane. He's a much cooler assassin who, fun fact, is the father of Cassandra Cain. He also trained a young Bruce Wayne for a short time, and eventually went on to be an adversary of the Dark Knight, and finally, the only character of the cut trio to end up actually making an appearance in the Arkham universe, Black Spider. Black Spider appeared in the now non-canon movie Assault on Arkham, and was voiced by Gus Fring. That's genuinely the most interesting thing I can tell you about Black Spider. Oh, and he might have been killed by Jason Todd in Arkham Knight, we don't know for sure, but that's about it. Moving on. Back to the early development of Arkham Origins, did you know that the shock gloves were originally going to be a selectable gadget, not dissimilar to Nightwing's Shock Blast in Arkham City? We can actually play around with this in the leaked pre-alpha versions of Arkham Origins, specifically the much earlier versions. The gloves would be selectable on the gadget wheel like any other gadget and would be used by pressing the left trigger and right trigger, similar to the Batarang. Interestingly, the gloves had no quickfire feature, making them really hard to use in combat, which is probably why it was changed to the gloves we see in the final build. It's also worth noting the gloves were also available in their chargeable form, but the charge lasted less time, and other than that, they'd need to be selected manually. But for our next group of facts, I've drafted in some help from the Oracle of Arkham Origins Online, Ranger. All of his links will be down below, so without further ado, Ranger, take it away.
Thank you, Charles. Well, yes, it is I, Ranger, a guy who is obsessed with Origins Online. So, I brought some fun facts most of you probably didn't know. For example, did you guys know that we were supposed to have a fifth map? In the release version, we only got 4. Blackgate, my personal favorite, Wayne Chemical Plant, Funhouse, and Mother City Robot Factory. This fifth map was simply called Rooftops. It depicted a weapon manufacturing facility where the Joker and Bane gangs try to break into. Sadly, this map is only available on the 8th of November 2013 builds of the Xbox 360 version. Footage from Resender was able to make it somewhat playable, but the map is completely unfinished. Also, here are some concept art from Andre Porter, who worked on the game. The last fun fact that I brought today is all about the boy wonder, Robin. If any of you ever complained about Robin's gameplay in this game mode, him having the Arkham City moveset of Robin, by not being Team Drake but instead Dick Grayson, who is more well known as Nightwing and also he was the first Robin ever, I'm telling you, the devs wanted to do justice. In the Batman Arkham Origins Collector's Art Book, there is an entry for Robin where, you guessed it, he has Eskrima sticks, the iconic weapons of Nightwing, instead of the staff team uses in City and Night. This indicates that in early development, Robin was supposed to be closer to Arkham City Nightwing, at least in terms of gameplay. Thankfully, the Arkham community's most talented modders were able to update Robin's moveset, making it how the devs originally intended it to be. Check out Charles' video, where we played some games with the Batman Arkham Origins Online Extended Cut mod. Also, join to Charles' Discord so you can try out the mod yourself and play online with us, and maybe check out my video showcasing the mod and some matches that we had not too long ago. Thanks for having me, Charles.
At the end of Arkham Origins' big story DLC, Cold Cold Heart, if you stay throughout the credits, you can hear a conversation on the radio between Jack Ryder and Quincy Sharp, the future mayor of Gotham City and warden of Arkham Asylum. This conversation teases the reopening of Arkham Asylum and Sharp's dedication to his future prospects of running for mayor. I'll let that conversation play out now because it's one that I'm sure a lot of you might not have heard.
Our next guest, political strategist Dean Snyder, has been following tonight's events since the start, more than 8 hours ago. Dr. Snyder, let's start with you. What's your view?
Well, Jack, it's a travesty. The ultimate failing of the justice system. A vigilante cleaning up our streets after countless deaths and bombings? What has happened to our police force? What about James Gordon? He didn't exactly prove himself tonight.
Hold on a minute, Dean. Now, I'm no defender of the GCPD or Captain Gordon for that matter. Like you said, tonight's debacle is some reflection of his efficacy, but I can't see any police force in any municipality doing a substantially better job against criminals like this Joker character or any of the hired killers he's brought into town. I mean, these guys are a different breed. We've never seen anything like this. So for me, it's less a reflection on Gotham's cops and more of a reflection on the state of our country. A country where our mental health and education systems are so warped and broken that we produce criminals of this nature.
You raise an interesting point, Hank, but what I'm wondering is what we'll do next.
No, it's not an interesting point. It's just plain wrong. They're both wrong. This isn't about the police or the Batman. It isn't about the state of our nation somehow churning out a dangerous new batch of the criminally deranged. It's about the failing of one single institution. An institution which, in my view, represents the biggest threat to Gotham and its citizens. A time bomb, just waiting to go off. If tonight's events have taught us anything, it's that Blackgate is not the place to be housing our city's most dangerous offenders. Not one, but 2 prison breaks in the same night. All of tonight's tragedies would have been avoided if Gotham had a proper treatment facility for its top echelon offenders. A place with impenetrable security, where the most dangerous could be isolated, rehabilitated, and treated for their illness. A place like Arkham Asylum. And after what happened tonight, I promise the good people of Gotham that I will work tirelessly. I will lobby the city council, go to the governor if I have to, do everything in my power to get Arkham Asylum reopened, so we can all sleep a little easier.
There you have it. Quincy Sharp placing the blame for tonight's events not on the Batman, not on the Joker, but on Blackgate Prison, and pledging to return Arkham Asylum to full operations. We'll be back with more from Mr. Sharp and our other guests when the Jack Ryder Hour continues after this message.
Now, one of Arkham Origins' most controversial changes was its changing of Harley and Joker's first meeting. Arkham Origins shows Joker and Harleen Quinzel first crossing paths in Blackgate, but the patient interview tapes in Arkham Asylum directly contradict this, by stating they met at Arkham instead, adapting the classic mad love storyline from Batman the Animated Series. I can't believe I have to say this, but Arkham Origins is believed to be non-canon by a lot of people. I just want to dispel that myth now. Arkham Origins is very canon, which makes it weirder that this change was ignored in later entries. When Rocksteady released Arkham Knight 2 years after Origins, Harley's character bio reverted back to the original idea, once again claiming her obsession with Joker began at Arkham Asylum, not Blackgate like Origins shows. The series only half fixes this inconsistency years later on down the line with Batman Arkham Shadow. One audio tape has Harleen and Joker pretending to meet for the first time, with Harleen suggesting this is a roleplay Joker enjoys repeating, which neatly reframes their Arkham Asylum dialogue as part of the act rather than a hard contradiction.
Good morning, Jay.
Well, hello, nurse. Wait, you're not Dr. Crane.
What? Oh, it's me, Dr. Quinzel.
What a lovely name. I don't believe we've met.
Oh, we're doing this again, huh? Okay. Hello, sir. I'm Dr. Harleen Quinzel, your new therapist.
Well, you know what they say. You never forget your first time.
Nice to see that a couple of months in Blackgate hasn't hurt your sense of humor.
It's not so bad. Like a mediocre restaurant on the moon. Although, the company's better. Your new boss can be a real hoot, too.
Who, Crane? Sure. If your idea of a good time is seeing how far someone can stuff their head up their own ass.
Well, my entertainment options are a little limited down here, Toots.
Anyway, you get me today instead, because he's out with a real bad tummy ache. It's a real shame no one bothered to tell him about the meatloaf.
Why, Holly, I do believe I may be starting to rub off on you.
Or maybe it's the other way around. Which reminds me, I brought another can of that spray cheese you like. Just make sure the guards don't see it.
You take such good care of me.
Stop, silly. It just doesn't make sense why they keep you locked up down here for so long. It's been months, and you've been on your best behavior.
Exactly. It's as if you can't start a riot, kill a bunch of guards, flood a few cell blocks with poison gas, and burn down the old admin building anymore. Well, without being treated like a common criminal.
Yeah, well, I never liked that building anyway.
So it kind of fixes this, but also not really. Let me know what your headcanon is for the criminal couple's first meeting. Personally, I love the Asylum audio tapes version of the story, but that's just me. Anyway, moving on. Our final fact from the pre-alpha version of Batman Arkham Origins comes in the form of some interesting changes made to the Mad Hatter side mission, where Batman must save a girl from the grotesque clutches of Jervis Tetch. These changes can be found in two separate versions of the mission and come in the form of all three members of the Wayne family being enemies for Batman to fight. Yes, that's right, in one of the versions of this mission, the player would have to fight off versions of Bruce Wayne as they rush Batman from the mirror dimension. Absolutely insane. The other change found in a much later version of the game would have Batman fight his parents. Yes, you heard me right, this version of the side mission would have seen the Dark Knight fight Thomas and Martha Wayne. In this version of the fight, we can see a note left by a developer which reads, "Wayne's to be replaced by chalk outline versions," hinting at the fact we're not only supposed to fight Bruce's parents, but Bruce's recently shot parents. This is probably the most insane thing I've seen in any build of any Arkham game, so let me know if you think this should have been in the final release as we move on to our final fact of the video. This is a fun one for the fellow Arkham Shadow enthusiasts among us. Although he wasn't active during the Christmas Eve riots, a sign-in sheet at Blackgate Prison reveals that Jonathan Crane had made multiple visits to the facility. With context given to us by Shadow, we can deduce he was likely scouting test subjects for his research. What's more unsettling is what happens when we observe the sheet again at the end of the night, and we can see that Crane never actually signed out. We can assume that among the chaos of the riots that night, Crane was grabbing prisoners for his experiments, and he was still somewhere inside Blackgate, forcing them to live through their worst fears. Fact number 1 takes us to the Botanical Gardens, where we can find a statue of Constance Arkham, the wife of the founder, Amadeus. This statue is missing its head and has Mad Dog scratched into the name plaque. This is a direct reference to the classic Batman story Arkham Asylum, a serious house on serious Earth, where a criminal called Martin Mad Dog Hawkins killed Amadeus' wife and child, with his daughter being decapitated. This statue stands as both a reminder of his wife's death, but also how his daughter met her end, and the inscription on the plaque just ties it all together in a tragic display of brutality. In the main game, while following a lead to Dr. Penelope Young's office regarding the Titan formula notes, you might notice some rats in the vent you used to get into her office. Well, have you ever looked at them properly? If you have, you might notice that one rat is slightly bigger and more decrepit than the other, and if we head just before the vent ends, we can find a bottle of what was presumably an early form of Titan. Putting 2 and 2 together gives us 4, and we can deduce these rats, or at least one of them, ingested, forcefully or willingly, some early strain of the Titan formula and met a grisly fate in this very vent. The Lunatics, everyone's least favourite enemy type, but a staple of Arkham Asylum and its gameplay. Well, have you ever wondered what happened to them following the Joker's Island takeover? Well, after most of the inmates were locked up, the Lunatics met one of 2 grisly ends. The first was being used by Hugo Strange as experiment fodder, something we can see the aftermath of in Arkham City's Wonder Avenue. And the second fate they met was being shipped off to Penguin like cattle and used as target practice for his men. This is one of the saddest endings for any group in the Arkhamverse, because we have to remember, although they were insane, they were people. People who'd been abandoned by the system and given over to 2 of the most brutal people in the city as fodder. This is less of a fact and more of a pair of little quirks regarding the island, which I just think add to the overall creepiness of it. The first being that rainfall on the island is incredibly inconsistent. If we stand in the medical facility, we can see it's raining outside. However, when we head out onto the island, nothing. It's barren. I think it's fair to say we all know the real reason, technical limitations of the time, and this would be changed for the 2016 Return to Arkham remasters. But something about this kind of works for Arkham. It feels supernatural to the utmost degree, so having this weird, inconsistent rainfall combined with the barren, almost lifeless weather outside just adds to that feel. Arkham shouldn't feel like it's connected to our world, and this solidifies that feeling. It feels like a whole new world, something driven home by the other little quirk. This one is really silly, nitpicky, but also kind of creepy and cool. That is that the entire island rearranges itself after Batman drives in right at the start. If we look at the opening cutscene of the game, we can see a long road straight into Arkham, which makes sense. We can kind of see this in-game. But after that, it all goes to pot. Seriously, look at the game map, now look at this map. Not even close. The biggest tell of this is the fact we know the Batmobile was parked outside of intensive treatment. We see it in the background of the opening and obviously save it from the thugs attacking it later on. However, in the opening scene, Batman drives the Batmobile down the road, which leads to the grounds connecting Arkham Mansion and the gardens, which isn't possible due to there being no roads which lead from mainline Gotham to this part of the island. So somehow the entire island switches around while Batman is dealing with Joker in intensive treatment. There's also a few smaller quirks I'm sure you can see here, but that's the big one. Now obviously this was done so you get the iconic shot of the island in the opening, but also I think this is really cool and kind of creepy. Arkham definitely takes on a life of its own during this game, and I think these 2 little quirks, definitely the latter, really add to this. While traversing the botanical gardens, you can find yourself in the abandoned chamber, and although this room is packed with enough atmosphere to get an entry all by itself, something more disturbing can be seen if you head to the top of this waterfall. One of Joker's men will drop from the sewer pipe, and if we examine him, we can see that he's a failed Titan victim, having a malformed arm and face. He obviously didn't react well to the change and must have been one of the preludes to the pair of Titan thugs we fight in the secret labs later on. Not only did Joker pump this guy full of drugs, he then literally treated him like crap and flushed him down a drain pipe, which is both kind of funny but mostly really harrowing. In intensive treatment, while heading down this elevator shaft, you can head through a vent and find Jonathan Crane, aka Scarecrow's makeshift lair. In here we can find a few photos of Batman from the start of the game as he brings Joker into the asylum, a blueprint of intensive treatment, fear gas canisters, and the mushrooms he uses to create the gas. Scanning this will also solve a riddle, which is always a nice bonus. Following our trip into the bowels of the intensive treatment building, you might spot this, Killer Croc's weekly menu, and well, it's an interesting read. On Monday he gets offal, which is essentially butchered animal organs, then on Tuesday he gets intestine, how nutritious, and then on Wednesday tripe, which is the stomach lining of farm animals, usually cows. Thursday's meal is leftovers, Friday and Saturday are either undecided or he isn't getting anything, and if the latter is true it makes the final meal of the week, Sundays, particularly cruel, as what I can only imagine is a joke by Aaron Cash, they're feeding him crocodile. Now this is both extremely funny and also really messed up. Imagine starving for 2 days and then being given a meal only to find out it's human flesh. Yeah, that's what my beloved Killer Croc goes through here, and for his sake and the guards, I hope he did get fed on Friday and Saturday. What is a moth if not a killer? Well, did you know Killer Moth actually has not only been in Arkham Asylum, but killed someone here? That's right, if you head into the botanical gardens just outside the secret garden lab, you can find this poor fella all wrapped up and stuck to the ceiling, a clear showing of dominance by the most dangerous rogue in the Bat's ever-expanding gallery of baddies. Batman is Bruce Wayne. This fact was sent to me by Lex, who you can ridicule in the Discord free of charge. The link is down below, and if you happen to join, let us know Lex's Elite Ball knowledge sent you. During the early portion of the game, while tracking Officer Balls's whiskey trail to the elevator Harley kindly drops on you, if you take a small detour to the right hand side of this little room and stand by this phone, you can hear Joker toying with the victim of his takeover's wife.
Hello? What's happening there? I'm trying to contact Steve. Is he there?
Hold 1 second. I'll see if I can find him.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I've looked everywhere, but I can only find his head. I'll get back to you when I find the rest of him.
This short and sweet phone call is kind of funny in a really twisted way, of course, and I do not condone chopping people up. Anyway, before I dig this hole any deeper, let's move on to the next fact. While exploring the penitentiary, you can find and obtain the interview tapes of one Victor Zsasz. These tapes recall the story of how Zsasz became who he is now, his views on humanity, and well, I'll let you listen because it's pretty insane.
Taped patient evaluation 1. Patient name is Victor Zsasz. Diagnosed clinically insane after the murder of at least 20 women in the Gotham area. Hello, Victor. I'm Dr. Cassidy. Seeing as this is our first session, let's spend some time getting to know each other.
I don't need to know you, Miss Cassidy. Everything is meaningless.
Don't you think that's a very negative outlook on life, Victor?
You've no doubt read my file.
Yes, I have. It says you come from a wealthy family, that your parents died, how you lost all the money gambling.
And none of it matters.
Why do you keep saying that, Victor?
Because the only thing that does matter is the mark. Have you seen my work, Miss Cassidy?
If you're referring to the marks on your...
Of course I mean my tally marks. And I have a space for yours. Do you want to see where?
Taped patient evaluation 5. Victor is not responding well to treatment. Victor, yesterday we spoke about the people you killed.
Ah, the zombies.
They are all people, Victor.
They are zombies. Continuously shuffling through the daily grind, waiting for someone to liberate them.
You mean kill them? The police report states that you've murdered, or liberated, if you like, 20 young women in the last 3 months. Each had her throat slit and was left posed.
They were all lucky to be chosen to receive my gift.
I doubt they would agree with you.
Really? How about you, Miss Cassidy? As you take the elevator to your apartment each night, open the 6 locks to apartment 433. Remember you forgot to buy your cat food. Again.
How do you know
as
where
you sit down on your favorite red chair, cat on lap, just waiting for something to happen. I can make it happen, Sarah. I am your salvation.
Patient's name is Victor Saz. For the record, the patient has transferred from Dr. Cassidy, who is on leave after the incident last week. Hello, Victor. Please, take a seat. Guards, you can leave us.
Sorry, Doctor. Warden's orders. I can't leave you alone with him.
I understand. Hello, Victor. How are you feeling today? Victor, I can't help you if you don't speak.
Depressed. Does that help you? Can you get into my mind, Doctor?
Why depressed?
I'm just thinking about the one that got away. The one I chose. I needed the mark. I want the mark!
Victor has been more subdued recently. Response to medication has been poor.
Touching.
Hello, Victor. Is there anything you'd like to talk about today?
Touching.
Victor! This is going nowhere.
Touching.
Guards! Get him out of here!
You heard the doctor. Get out. Didn't you hear me?
He's got a knife! Ah! Get a trike in him! Get a trike in him! Oh, God! He's on Bill!
He's cutting him. Get him off. Get him off. We need help here.
Victor has been in isolation since the attack on Zagar last week. As I wait for him to be brought up to me, I have had time to review his notes. I am increasingly worried he cannot be cured. He has no empathy for his victims. Deep down, I believe he views all of us as potential victims.
Doc, are you okay?
What's happening?
It's Zaz. He broke out of isolation. He's gone.
Oh, God!
Don't worry, Doc. You're in the safest place. He's definitely left the island.
Of course. But someone needs to alert the authorities. He'll need to kill again. Do you understand me? Needs to. Oh, no. He's gone after Dr. Cassidy.
Hello?
Sarah, it's Gretchen. Listen to me.
Hold on. There's someone at the door.
Sarah! Do not answer the door. Can you hear me? Do not answer the door. It says he's free.
So yeah, Zaz went after Dr. Cassidy, but don't you worry, dear viewer, Dr. Cassidy was saved by Batman in the Road to Arkham comic, just before Victor made another mark in his skin. This is what I only noticed recently, but in the Arkham graveyard there are only 2 opened graves. Amadeus Arkham's, the island's founder, and one other towards the back of the graveyard. A few theories have popped up regarding who this might be. After all, it does seem weird that one open grave would be arguably the most important person in the island's history, presumably defaced by inmates, or Quincy Sharp, and the other grave be nobody, right? Well, one theory from Reddit suggests that this might be Amadeus' nephew, Jeremiah Arkham, given the shape of the skull and how he's drawn in the comics. I personally like this theory, but I'd be interested to hear who you guys think is buried here. Maybe it's Constance Arkham, Elizabeth Arkham, Amadeus' mother. The possibilities aren't quite endless, and this could all just be a big nothing burger, but it's fun to speculate. Anyway, let's move on to some more Amadeus-related lore, shall we? If we head into the rafters of Arkham Mansion, we can find a curious looking cell. This cell once held Amadeus Arkham after his spiral into madness. This spiral began after he would eventually kill his family's murderer, Mad Dog Hawkins, and rule it as an accident, and this would eventually lead to Amadeus becoming an inmate in his own asylum, where he'd eventually die. The symbols which are scrawled all over the cell are a mystery, the drawings of a madman. However, within the source material, and it's dealing with themes of insanity, rebirth and life, and the never-ending cycle of madness that haunts Arkham's halls, I think these circles are symbolic of those same themes. Rebirth, the cycle of madness, it all makes sense, and I think given the respect the game shows to stories like A Serious House and Living Hell, this adds up pretty nicely. And for our final fact, this is a little 2-for-1, but throughout the events of the Arkham series, the Warden of Arkham Asylum, Quincy Sharp, was actually being drugged and mind-controlled by none other than Professor Hugo Strange. To get the Warden fully under control, Strange enlisted someone who specialised in breaking minds, Jervis Tetch, better known as the Mad Hatter. Strange told Tetch to pay Sharp a visit and use his knack for mind control to make him more compliant. Knowing Tetch's obsession with Alice in Wonderland and his need to find his Alice, Strange sweetened the deal by supplying him with a new victim. A pretty horrifying trade, but one that worked perfectly. Over the next 3 years, Strange continued his little experiment, dosing Sharp with Tetch's hallucinogens, while applying his own psychological manipulation. Slowly, Sharp became less of a man and more of a puppet. However, Gotham thought he was still the proud warden of Arkham, and later a promising political candidate ready to save the city. But in reality, Strange was the one calling the shots from behind the scenes. His first major play was pushing Sharp to run for mayor. If he won, Strange wouldn't just control Arkham Asylum, he'd get something even better. His shot at a new kind of prison funded by forces beyond our comprehension, Arkham City. And if you want a deeper dive into Strange, Hatter or Sharp, check out the lore video playlist where we do a deep dive into each of these characters individually. Tim Drake, the third Robin, and the owner of the most divisive character design in the series. And this division all comes down to the fact that he is, well, bald, or at least has a shaved head. Either way, this was a huge stray away from the classic look which Tim took on in the comics, and well, basically everywhere else. A lot of people wonder why Tim took on this new, more edgy look, but in 2011, on the official Arkham City forums, senior concept artist Can Muftich actually spoke about why they went for this more hardcore and interesting design for the third man to take on the Robin mantle, and here's what he said. We wanted to create a Robin that players would identify as a contemporary character and move away from the traditional boy wonder image that most people know. Our vision of Robin is one of a troubled young individual that is calm and introverted at times, but very dangerous and aggressive if provoked. He'd go on to say, the shaved head is inspired by cage fighters, because we thought that Robin might be doing that in his spare time to keep him on his toes. Still, we kept all the classic trademarks of Robin's appearance, such as the red and yellow colours of his outfit, the cape and the mask. He's back and he means business. Now this was definitely an interesting design philosophy, being inspired by cage fighters and giving that grit and toughness to a character whose main weapon is typically his mind, especially Tim Drake, was certainly an interesting choice. And in all honesty, I think it paid off. It might be a departure from the norm, but I think it perfectly encapsulated the edginess and the faithfulness of the Arkhamverse, which we've all come to know and love from the series over the last decade and a half. Let me know what you think of Robin's design in the Arkham series. I'd be interested to know the general consensus all these years later as we move on to the next fact. We've all probably played Batman Arkham City enough times to remember the whole script off by heart. Like, if you don't believe me, you're about to find out. No, but seriously, as with all games, things are cut, changed and thrown aside for the sake of saving time, money or resources. But did you know some of Arkham City's cut lines are still available to be found in the game files? Well, we actually have a cut conversation here between Alfred and Batman regarding entrance to the Solomon Wayne courthouse.
Alfred, check the schematics for the courthouse. I need to find a route in.
If the main door is inaccessible, it appears that there is another door leading from the balcony on the front of the building. Perhaps you should try that.
Now, obviously this conversation would have been taken from the start of the game, where Batman needs to infiltrate the courthouse to rescue Catwoman, and I can kinda see why they cut this. Yeah, it would have been nice to hear Batman and Alfred converse a bit more, but if Batman had to ask Alfred for a way into the courthouse, it would A, make him seem a bit stupid. Hell, there are 2 front doors on the courthouse, so he'd seem a little bit clueless, and B, if Batman had to ask for a way into the courthouse, and then 20 minutes later had to ask for a way into the steel mill, it would again seem like Batman was just plain lazy. It makes sense to have him ask for a way into the steel mill, it's a whole compound guarded to the teeth, but asking twice in 20 minutes, well, I kind of get why they cut this. The second conversation they cut was also between Batman and Alfred, and would have taken place in Chapter 3 of the game's story.
Very good, sir. Shall I arrange another press conference?
I think I've had enough of press conferences.
I'm not surprised. That loathsome mayor has branded you, well, Bruce Wayne, a terrorist.
He needs to explain why his new prison is full of weapons. I'm going to investigate further. I'll be in touch.
This little conversation is so cool, and I actually wish they hadn't cut it. It gives us a nice insight into the humorous dynamic between Alfred and Bruce, and lets us into a side of the characters we don't really see much in the series. I also think it's interesting that Quincy Sharp branded Bruce Wayne a terrorist. It seems a bit overkill and was obviously a smear campaign from the former Warden of Arkham Asylum, but alas, I think this was a pretty neat conversation. The Falcones are probably the Batman universe's most iconic crime family, first appearing in Part 2 of the legendary Batman Year 1 by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. They've taken centre stage in some of the Dark Knight's best mainstream stories. Batman Begins and the Penguin series come to mind straight away, but we never really see much from them in the Arkham universe outside of Arkham Shadow, where Carmine Falcone plays a big role. I always found this a little odd, and I think a real Year 1 game would have been awesome, since we never really got the organised crime in Gotham, and we never really see it come crashing down. However, within Arkham City's stories, we do get some idea of what happened to the Falcone family's empire. The Falcones are America's oldest surviving crime family. Generation after generation has ruled the underworld with iron fists, preferring to stay away from more colourful supervillain activities. They maintain legitimate business interests, including garbage collection and shipping companies. The current head of the family, Carmine the Roman Falcone, is feared by all, and until recently had the city in his pocket, but something has changed. Quincy Sharp, the newly elected mayor, and a man who should be afraid of him, was not. Carmine's attempts to intimidate Sharp had resulted in his henchmen mysteriously disappearing, and Sharp has struck back, with the Tiger Guards closing down Falcone's operations all over the city. So from what we can gather here, whatever remained of the Falcone Empire following Batman, Commissioner Gordon and Harvey Dent's efforts between Arkham Origins and Shadow was later crushed by Quincy Sharp and Tiger, leaving them resigned to the annals of history in Gotham City. So, with the Falcones being forced out of Arkham City by Tiger, and a power vacuum opening within the mega prison's walls, a gang war kicked off. A gang war we can actually see take place in the background of our time in Arkham City. So, our main players in the gang war are Two-Face, Penguin and the Joker. Two-Face was running with the weakest hand of the three, with his territory limited to the Solomon Wayne courthouse and a few surrounding streets, and most of his crew were bottom of the food chain convicts trying to prove themselves. Equipment-wise, he was also struggling. Very few armed thugs, very little heavy firepower, and once he captured Catwoman, the public execution we stop in the courthouse was the former DA trying to boost his standing by killing a prominent inmate. Of course, Batman shut that down immediately, and after that pretty public humiliation, Two-Face would vanish into hiding. So deep that even his own men didn't know where he was operating from for most of Arkham City's story. Joker, on the other hand, went pretty wide with his net. His gang was easily the most unhinged, as is fitting, and it was packed with violent killers and psychopaths. He controlled massive portions of the map, including the Industrial District, Amusement Mile, and the Old Gotham Freeway, with his armed thugs stationed inside the steel mill, turning it into a fortified stronghold, while the rest of his territory relied on lookout towers and roaming patrols to keep pressure on the streets. Then there's Penguin, who had arguably the strongest overall position at the start. He had the best weapons and equipment in the city, and surprisingly his men weren't just random street punks either, they were battle tested in the gladiator pit in the museum. But instead of spreading thin like Joker, Penguin concentrated his forces in the Bowery, a smaller but densely fortified area. Penguin was probably the most heavily defended of the three, but that being said, Penguin wasn't purely defensive. He sent a squad to capture Mr. Freeze from the old GCPD precinct, and they pulled it off as we see in the story. But Penguin wouldn't stop there, and he made the first major tactical move by blowing the Old Gotham Freeway after Batman escapes the GCPD, effectively trapping Joker's forces inside the Industrial District. Even after the bombing though, some of Joker's men still managed to push into Park Row, interrogating inmates for intel, especially anything related to Mr. Freeze. His gang launched an incursion into Two-Face's territory, hoping to drag Harvey out of hiding. They only managed to grab a handful of thugs though for questioning, because the rest of Two-Face's crew had already made a break for the rooftops to escape. Once Batman tore through the museum, rescued Mr. Freeze, and took down Solomon Grundy and the Penguin, the power balance shifted again, with Penguin's gang becoming fractured. A large chunk of them ended up defecting, joining up with either Joker or Two-Face just to stay alive, and because of this, Two-Face's crew recovered really quickly and capitalised on Penguin's sudden absence thanks to Batman. They stormed the Bowery, occupied the now abandoned museum, and expanded their control across the prison, and at the same time, Joker's men pushed into the subway tunnels, either killing or recruiting what remained of Penguin's forces. But there was a fourth, more interesting player here. As part of his master plan, Hugo Strange was funneling high-tech weapons and equipment down into the tunnels for Joker's gang, turning them into an even bigger threat. Two-Face's crew also suddenly had access to heavier firepower, though it's never made entirely clear whether that came from Strange or if they simply raided what was left of Penguin's arsenal. Either way, the two remaining gangs were now both armed to the teeth. The gangs were tearing each other apart, the prison was destabilised, and that was the cue for Protocol 10 to be activated, thanks to City Hall clearing the plan, blaming Strange's failure in stopping the use of illegal weapons within the prison to justify the giant slaughter that was to come. So, with Joker dead and his gang in disarray before Harley takes over, with Penguin locked in his own museum and Hugo Strange out of the picture, we can confidently say, somehow, the initial weakest of the three gangs would come out the victor, with Two-Face being the last one standing, and thus winning by default. Arkham City's gang war is one of the coolest side stories in the series, and one that if you're not paying attention, you might not have even noticed was happening. Anyway, let's move on to the next fact. Arkham Asylum was obviously a smash hit, and so to follow it up, Rocksteady needed to do at least twice as well as they did in their first outing, in the Cape and Cowl. And because of this, they definitely didn't want to let the Asylum influence go to waste, because in early promotional shots for Arkham City, if we examine the suit shown in these images, we can see that initially, the Arkham City suit was actually going to have the same cowl as the Arkham Asylum suit. But what's most interesting is that the rest of the suit is clearly the Arkham City suit we're all used to, and as a little bonus, in early promo shots, we can actually see the Arkham Asylum bat signal in the sky, which is quite interesting. We can also see that the city cowl went through a lot of changes, and in many of the early artworks for the game, the city cowl has shorter, more curved ears. This even carries over to the Arkham City soundtrack album cover, which features these shorter, more curved ears. And yes, I have just ruined that for you, and no, you'll never be able to look at it the same way again. Also, in early promotional shots, the layout of the city was entirely different. In this image, we can see Wonder Tower behind the church, which obviously isn't how it's laid out in the final game. And in this shot, we can see an old build of Wonder Tower, and it looks a lot more stripped back and simple than the final version we see. Finally, to finish out this little pre-development segment brought to you by Mr. Binks, here we have 3 shots showing early versions of the courthouse, the GCPD headquarters, and the Arkham City entrance. All 3 of these designs are really cool, and I don't think they should have been changed. They really carry that Arkham Asylum-esque feeling, and I especially love the giant scales of justice on the courthouse. That just screams Arkham Asylum to me. It's big and bold and overbearing, and all 3 of these designs really add some much missing fear factor to Arkham City. Let me know what you think of these initial designs down below as we move into the final fact. The Joker, Batman's arch-nemesis and the driving force behind nearly every single event that happens in the Arkham games. But if you're like me, you probably wondered just how the hell he ended up in Arkham City. The obvious answer would be that he was simply transferred over from Arkham Asylum following the opening of Arkham City, but as Batman will tell you, nothing is ever that easy with the Joker. Thankfully though, Arkham City has us covered, as in the 3-part story titled A Sick Plan, we hear how Mr. J and Mrs. Q ended up in Arkham City. After Batman stopped him from escaping Arkham Asylum, the Joker sat alone in his padded cell, knowing something was wrong. The first sign was an unusual lump on his left shoulder. He felt tainted. Weeks went by and 10 more unusual lumps appeared. The Titan had done something to him, something bad, something that wasn't funny at all. The Joker was dying. He knew it, and soon so would anyone who saw him. The last thing he needed was to appear weak before his rivals. So, one day at lunch, the Joker took a spoon and dug out another inmate's eyes, knowing this would get him into solitary confinement. He could keep out of sight, at least until his transfer to Arkham City. The Joker needed an escape plan, and on the night of his transfer, Harley Quinn provided one. Disguised as an Arkham guard, she overpowered the Joker's escort and stole her pudding away to a boat waiting on the island's quayside. As the boat carrying the twisted pair sped off towards Gotham, it was joined by a second. A secret alarm placed by Batman had alerted him to the Joker's escape, and here he was in the Batboat pursuing the fugitives. They ignored his orders to stop, so Batman opened fire. As Harley steered the boat to shore, missiles ripped the hull to pieces. They swam, the weakened Joker being pulled through the water by a distraught Harley, desperate to save her pudding. She pulled the Joker out of the water to safety, somehow avoiding Batman's searchlight. She and the Joker sat there gasping for breath when they suddenly realised where they were: Arkham City. In retrospect, having the Arkham series be named anything aside from Batman Arkham insert word seems a little bit absurd, but did you know this might not have always been the plan? Well, old posters of Arkham City were discovered on ArtStation, and thanks to Ranger I have them right here, and they show the game's original title was going to be Batman The Last Laugh. Now, we don't know anything about this aside from the fact that it got far enough into development to have these 2 posters made, which begs the question, why was this even considered to be the title? The obvious pitfall of this title is the fact it completely spoils the ending of the story and Joker's death. We may have become accustomed to it now, but think how insane that is. Rocksteady killed Joker off in their second game, so to have that spoiled in the title seems pretty weird. What's interesting though is that we can still see a remnant of the title in the final game, because there's an achievement you get for taking down Harley Quinn in her DLC Harley Quinn's Revenge, with the achievement being titled The Last Laugh. I think given the breakout success of Arkham Asylum, Warner Brothers would have wanted the sequel to have that Arkham name. After all, the series wasn't established yet, and this might have affected sales right off the bounce if it didn't instantly relate itself to Asylum. Let me know what you think down below, and if you think Batman The Last Laugh is a better or worse title than Arkham City, and why you think it changed. Throughout Arkham City's runtime, you'll come across countless enemy types. Tiger Guards, Joker Thugs, Penguin's Gang, Ivy Thugs, Mad Hatter Soldiers, and that's not even half of them. But did you know there were supposed to be 2 more obstacles for the Dark Knight to punch his way through? Well, thanks to the Wii version of the game and it having a ton of cut content in its files, the 2 cut thugs were discovered. The first was the Joker Lieutenant, a heavily armoured weapon-wielding enemy who had this really cool, almost Leatherface looking design. Apparently he was the precursor to Mr. Hammer, but aside from that, not much is known about him. We do know though why he was cut. Are you ready for this? It's a seriously underwhelming reason, but he was cut because of his apron. Seriously, they just couldn't figure out how to make it work in game. A lackluster end for an otherwise insane looking character who really would have fit in with the Arkham Asylum type world design Rocksteady seemed to be going for in early promotional material for Arkham City. I think this design is so badass. He looks like a killer, and I think he'd have added a bit of grit into the enemy variety for sure. The next cut enemy is definitely intriguing, and from what I've gathered we know little to nothing about him, but he's called the Follower, and would have been something to do with the League of Assassins, perhaps a ninja variation or a commander. The Follower probably has one of the most striking character designs in the franchise. He's literally stark white, and what's most interesting is his trousers, which say Blackgate Death Row on them, meaning this guy was at one point supposed to be executed for something. I can think of a few reasons this guy was cut, but I think the big one for me is that he'd have been a member of the League of Assassins who got captured by Batman and then held on death row by Blackgate staff, which, considering Blackgate's shoddy security reputation, must have been a bit humiliating for him. All jokes aside though, this guy looks awesome, and he's probably my favourite bit of Arkham City's cut content, but it certainly isn't the last bit of cut content from the pinnacle of the Arkham series. If you've played the Arkham games for any amount of time, or spent any time mingling with the inmates of the community, the name Prometheus probably still actually means nothing to you, past the fact he had a character bio in Arkham Asylum, and was then cut from Arkham Knight. However, did you know he was also mentioned in Arkham City? It's a small and easily missed part of the game, but if you head into the old GCPD precinct and take a look at the posters on the wall, you'll find Prometheus on a dossier, including some very interesting dates which further throw the Arkham timeline into disarray. With Prometheus supposedly being released in 1982, which throws a spanner into the works with this series' already insane timeline. Also in the GCPD though, we can find a newspaper clipping which boasts the headline, "Criminal Couple Gunned Down," which is a cut and dry reference to Prometheus' origin story, which is a near mirror of Bruce Wayne's, with his parents being shot and killed by police instead of a criminal, leading to Prometheus becoming the anti-Batman, who targets the do-gooders of Gotham City. With the first 2 games in the series both hinting at a potential Prometheus appearance and him being cut from Knight, it's a little odd he never got a single physical appearance throughout the series. Although since we know the Justice League are canon thanks to Suicide Squad killed the Justice League, there's a decent chance Prometheus fought the Justice League if he was even active at this point. During development of Batman Arkham City, the team at Rocksteady were working on a potential online multiplayer mode. This mode was titled Arkham City Gangland. The mode would actually be later ported to Origins and become Arkham Origins Online, hence why that mode has a lot of Arkham City's assets in it. What's interesting is that the Arkham City Gangland mode was cut so early on that the version that became Arkham Origins Online actually had Catwoman in it, and she was supposed to become a new playable character within Arkham Origins Online. I have no idea how this would have worked, but the most important thing is it definitely would have been pretty cool to see what this would have looked like in-game. Let me know what you think of Arkham City Gangland, and if you think it would have been a good addition to the game down below. Personally, I'm in favour of the game having no multiplayer, but hey, that's just me. Anyway, let's move on to the next fact, and thank you to the Atom Smith for this footage. Throughout the Arkham franchise, Poison Ivy is one of the few villains who keeps popping up. After her debut in Asylum, she reappears in Arkham City and helps Catwoman break into Hugo Strange's vault. But that raises an obvious question. How did Ivy end up inside Arkham City in the first place? The city story, Poisonous Intent, fills in the gap between Asylum and City, and this is where it all starts. Ready to turn over a new leaf, Pamela Isley rejected her Poison Ivy persona and opened up a small flower shop in the back streets of Gotham. Surrounded by plants, she was content for a while, but society continued to mistreat her quote-unquote babies, and eventually she snapped. A man came to buy flowers for his wife, obviously feeling guilty about having been unfaithful. Pamela smiled and handed over an elaborate bouquet. The plants came to life, rapidly growing onto his screaming face and piercing his skin with toxic thorns. Pamela laughed, and Poison Ivy was back. After being given an overdose of Titan by the Joker, Poison Ivy was left to die in her airtight cell by Warden Sharp, who blamed her for the mass destruction of Arkham Island. As her health declined, she prayed for salvation. It came in the form of a priest, who was unknowingly covered in pollen from the trees near his church. As he performed the last rites, Ivy manipulated the pollen into an antidote that worked in harmony with the unique natural toxins in her blood, and to the amazement of the priest, she began a full recovery. Furious, Warden Sharp locked her in a biological containment unit and arranged for her to be one of the first criminals sent to Arkham City. I feel like this has become relatively common knowledge within the Arkham community, but in 2011, just before the release of Batman Arkham City, Sefton Hill, the creative director behind Arkham Asylum, City and Night, went on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, and the host got to play a demo build of Arkham City to promote it. In this footage, we can see not much changing from the final build, aside from the section Jimmy plays later in the segment, which has Joker doing a little gang initiation with some new recruits. Jimmy enters detective mode and reveals Joker has no bones, hint hint, and then he glides down and takes the thugs on and Joker down. And I must say, Jimmy Fallon kinda has moves with this game. He does surprisingly well for a guy who probably hadn't played Arkham Asylum. Anyway, after they're taken out, the demo ends. This was considered lost media for years, but came to light a few years ago, and it gives us a really good look at Arkham City before release. Anyway, let's get into the next fact because, well, it's a doozy.
Nobody cares about Tim Drake.
Within Arkham City's story, around the midway point, the player hunts down a member of Ra's al Ghul's League of Assassins to track her back to the League's hideout to procure some of Ra's blood. On the way, and after being knocked down by the assassin and being saved by Robin, well, that's where we hit a wall with this fact, because at one point, did you know this was supposed to be Nightwing who came to save Bruce and give him the line launcher? We know this because in the files lies a file titled Chapter 4 Meet Nightwing, and this part of the game is indeed Chapter 4, which means that Dick Grayson was definitely planned to be here instead of Tim Drake. It also explains why Nightwing is even in the game to begin with, because if we're being honest with ourselves, as fun as he is to play with, he has literally no impact on the game at all, and only serves as a DLC character to use in challenge mode. There isn't much more to add to this, but let me know if you'd have preferred Nightwing to show up over Robin, and let's move on to our penultimate fact. While playing the Arkham games, you might wonder, how do the supervillains get the buildings they need for their elaborate schemes? Well, contrary to popular belief, they actually do buy them, mostly. See, if we read the city story titled Brokering Deals, we learn that even the scum of Gotham need realtors. Sherman Fine, aka the Broker, has carved out a lucrative business in Gotham City by being the go-to guy to purchase property. Mainly hired by the criminal underclass, Sherman will find and arrange all the necessary paperwork to ensure that the deal will go untraced, while providing exactly what the client needs. In the past, he purchased rooms on behalf of the Great White Shark, Mr. Zsasz, and the Joker. When planning his revenge on Batman, the Riddler took advantage of the Broker's services to secure the buildings that would later house his challenges. What we can glean from this is that the Broker really is the go-to guy for Gotham's underbelly, but we can go one step further and head to Scarecrow's secret hideout, and on the lower deck of the boat moored outside the amusement park, we can find a Falcone shipping manifest, which has a note on it that reads, "Mr. Fine was very specific about the shipping details and we have followed them to the letter," showing that in some capacity he's working with both the Falcone family, and this might explain how Crane got his penthouse in Chinatown come the events of Batman Arkham Knight. Anyway, let's move on to our final fact. So, Victor Zsasz. You might love him, you might hate him, but did you know Mr. Zsasz is at the epicenter of Arkham's very first timeline contradiction between the games? Not the comics, they never make any sense, but between Arkham City and Asylum. This is the first of many which would follow, and it all stems back to Dr. Sarah Cassidy, the Arkham doctor Victor kidnaps in his Asylum patient interview tapes.
Victor has been in isolation since the attack on Zagar last week. As I wait for him to be brought up to me, I have had time to review his notes. I am increasingly worried he cannot be cured. He has no empathy for his victims. Deep down, I believe he views all of us as potential victims.
Doc, are you okay?
What's happening?
It's Zsasz. He broke out of isolation. He's gone.
Oh, God!
Don't worry, Doc. You're in the safest place. He's definitely left the island.
Of course. But someone needs to alert the authorities. He'll need to kill again. Do you understand me? Needs to. Oh no. He's gone after Dr. Cassidy.
Hello?
Sarah, it's Gretchen. Listen to me.
Hold on. There's someone at the door.
Sarah! Do not answer the door. Can you hear me? Do not answer the door. It's Zsasz. He's free.
See, this tape shows us pretty firmly that Cassidy was kidnapped on December 22nd. However, if we go forward a few months to Arkham City and begin tracking the prison's cold call killer, we can scroll through his past convictions while Batman initially profiles Zsasz, and see that the Dr. Cassidy kidnapping actually happened on April 20th, moving the entire Arkham timeline forward for seemingly no reason at all. This is obviously the first in a long line of Arkham retcons, but let me know why you think they did this. Was the plan to render Asylum non-canon despite its effects on the main story, or was this just a small oversight they didn't think anyone would pay attention to? While exploring the expansive Gotham City given to us in Batman Arkham Knight, you might notice a ton of businesses and shops lining the street, but have you ever stopped to see what they're called and why they're called what they are? Well, a few standout names are as follows, and we'll begin with the Grinning Fishmonger, a clear reference to Joker's Laughing Fish, most prominently featured in the 1993 episode of Batman the Animated Series, titled The Laughing Fish, but also being featured in comics released as far back as the late 70s. Another one you might have missed is the Deacon's Mission, which is actually necessary to scan for a riddle, but is also a direct reference to the cult classic story, The Cult, a revolutionary story for the Dark Knight where Deacon Blackfire, yes, the guy you take down in less than 2 minutes in Arkham Knight, manages to kidnap Batman, hold him hostage for weeks, and eventually convert him to be a mindless drone who ends up gunning down a ton of people, before he snaps out of the mind control and takes Gotham back from the Mad Deacon, who has weaponized his homeless army into a militia of sorts. I know that sounds obscene, but it's a must-read for any Batman fan, and it's nice to see it get a bit of love here. Zatanna is a magic shop in Gotham City, obviously a reference to Zatanna Zatara, the supernatural sorceress, who many of you will be familiar with. There's also the Royal Flush Gang poker tables, again, a cut-and-dry reference to the namesake crime syndicate, the Royal Flush Gang, who many of you will be familiar with from shows like Justice League Unlimited and Batman Beyond. There's also a shop called Jackanapes, which isn't a direct call out to anything, but I'd like to think it's a reference to Jack Napier, one of the Joker's more famous alternate identities, most famously used in Batman 1989, and Sean Murphy's Batman the White Knight. There's also Quilt's Laundromat, which is a reference to Crazy Quilt, Batman's most dangerous foe. The sign even mentions their quote-unquote crazy prices, which is a nice little Easter egg. And finally, my personal favourite is a shop called the Music Meisters, which is obviously a nod to Music Meister, who you Batman the Brave and the Bold fans might be familiar with from the episode where he takes control over a UN satellite. There's a ton more of these little shops and businesses throughout the streets of Gotham, so let me know if you've spotted any more down below as we move on to our next fact. Thanks to games like Batman Arkham VR, we get a nice glimpse into what was going through Bruce's mind between the events of Batman Arkham City and Batman Arkham Knight. But this time period is also touched upon in Arkham Knight, with the story titled Faithful Servant, which gives us a nice look into that mysterious period through the lens of Alfred, Bruce's most trusted ally. Breakfast at Wayne Manor was served at 6 AM and traditionally consisted of an egg white omelette, a pot of black coffee, and a pair of mild painkillers served on a small silver dish to the side of the tray. Lately, Master Bruce had taken to leaving the omelette. Today was no exception, Alfred noted, stepping out of his employer's bedroom, tray in hand. This was unlike Bruce Wayne, who would force down bloody slabs of meat when sick, rather than risk loss of muscle mass. But Master Bruce hadn't been himself since the Joker died. Alfred expected some change, naturally, but he had hoped his master might relax. Instead, Bruce had attacked Gotham's criminal population with renewed intensity. When Alfred questioned him, Bruce had explained the necessity of striking, while the power vacuum still remained. Eminently sensible, yet Bruce's urgency seemed like a man running out of time. Alfred found Bruce in the Batcave, of course, already suited, sending revised specifications to Lucius for the new Batmobile. Sir, Alfred ventured, given that we have no pressing leads this evening and sundown is not for another 45 minutes, I thought I might tempt you with what remains of your breakfast. 42 minutes. Bruce kept his eyes on the Batcomputer screen. Alfred paused for a moment, wondering what possibly could have driven the man he raised to keep secrets from him for the first time in 30 years. Very good, sir, Alfred said, before leaving the room. This story is a great look into the goings-on in Wayne Manor, showing us that Bruce had gone into something of a paranoid mindset, more so than usual, following the Joker's death. It also shows us that the relationship between the pair had been strained, and Bruce was now running off of black coffee and painkillers to get through his days as Batman. I actually think this story is so cool. I love seeing this side of these characters, and it reminds me of Arkham Origins, the last time we saw Bruce and Alfred's relationship become strained because of Batman. Arkham Knight has such a great array of challenge maps and racetracks. We've got returning favourites from Arkham City like Wayne Manor and the Iceberg Lounge, newer favourites like Crime Alley and Endless Night, and remasters of old favourites like Silent Night and the Batcave. But have you ever wanted more destruction? Well, thanks to the cutting room floor, we know about a cut challenge map involving the Joker called $1 Million Mayhem. Now, although we don't know the exact ideas that went into this challenge, we do know the core elements of it. This map would involve the Joker in the Batmobile, similar to the ending of Arkham Knight, where we see the Joker drive the Jokermobile and take down a load of thugs. This challenge, however, would see Joker causing as much property damage as possible within Gotham City. The challenge description reads, "Cause as much mayhem as possible within 5 minutes and send the bill to Wayne Enterprises." And the 3 goals for the challenge are as follows. Goal 1 would see the player cause $250,000 worth of damage, Goal 2 would be $500,000 worth of damage, and Goal 3 would be $1 million worth of damage. In the game files, we also have something simply titled Wayne Tech Nuke, which we can assume would have been used here. The model is there and can be seen in Blender, but no official use case for this gadget has ever been found. Would you have enjoyed $1 Million Mayhem? I personally know I would have. This actually sounds so fun, especially if they made a portion of the city be fully destructible for it. The Arkham series perennial cook Prometheus. Oh my god, what a line. The Arkham series perennial cook Prometheus takes centre stage here, as he is once again made to sit in the files and watch his contemporaries play with Batman in Gotham City. See, while in Greek mythology Prometheus showed fire to the humans, in the Arkham series he withholds the possibly fire writing, and unlike his namesake, Prometheus doesn't have the foresight to show up in the series in any meaningful way. In the files there are remnants of naming conventions showing us that Prometheus was originally planned for the Season of Infamy DLC alongside Black Mask. Although Black Mask would be repurposed for the Red Hood DLC pack, Prometheus just doesn't show up. We all know Prometheus as the guy who seemingly couldn't make it into an Arkham game to save his life, and whereas the real Prometheus was punished by having his regrowing liver torn out every day for eternity, in the Arkhamverse he flips the dynamic on its head, and punishes us by being an eternal Easter egg. But this time, he doesn't even make it into the game in a physical way. He literally only appears in the files. It's honestly quite sad, but I think if he was ever going to appear, it should have been in Arkham Knight. Given the role the GCPD plays in this game and the precinct acting as something of a hub for the player in the game, I think this would have been perfect. Hypothetically, I think having Prometheus doing some cop killing and having Batman hunt him down, with the pair ultimately engaging in a boss fight atop the GCPD roof, could have been outrageously cool, and might have been one of the most satisfying side missions in the game, given his build-up across Asylum and City. However, this never materialised, and instead we got Mad Hatter, Killer Croc, Mr. Freeze, and Ra's al Ghul, who, let's be honest, are all probably in the top 10 side missions in Arkham Knight, so I'd say we got a good deal here. Let me know if you'd have liked to see Prometheus in Arkham Knight and how you'd have written him into the game, because I think there's a few really cool ways this could have been done. Anyway, let's get on to the next fact. As with all video games, cut content is a massive part of the development cycle for the Arkham series. We know Arkham Asylum was supposed to have an entirely different island, we know City was supposed to have cut thugs, and we know Origins was supposed to have Batman say the iconic "I'm Batman" line after beating Deathstroke on the final offer. But did you know Batman Arkham Knight also had a ton of cut content? Here though we'll be focusing on 2 different types of cut enemies. The first is the Armoured Militia Commander. These heavily armoured soldiers would have probably been an alternate design for the checkpoint commanders you could take down across the Own the Road side mission in Arkham Knight, and I imagine they would have also had to be stunned and beaten down, perhaps even multiple times to be finally taken out, a bit like the Armoured Brutes in Arkham Origins. The model for the Armoured Commander is actually in the game files and we can see what he would have looked like. Personally, I love this design a lot and think it's one of the more unique militia designs. The other cut enemy type we know of is the Suicide Pursuit Drone. This vehicle would have presumably been exactly what it says on the tin, a drone made to pursue the Batmobile and blow up on impact, thus giving it the name, the Suicide Pursuit Drone. Not much is known regarding its application in gameplay, or even how Batman would have dealt with this vehicular threat, but the fact we have a model for it in the game files is pretty telling of how far this little machine made it into development, before ultimately being cut from the final product. If you're anything like me, one of the main reasons you keep coming back to the Arkham series day after day is the fact it's your job to do so and you love it. And the awesome array of skins and cosmetics in the series, especially Batman Arkham Knight. Even discounting mods, we have the Dark Knight, Flashpoint, Battinson, 1970s, a new 52 suit and a ton more. But did you know there are actually a handful of suits cut from the game? Well, this image released by Warner Bros. And Rocksteady shows us an array of suits, most of which we ended up getting in the final game. We can see the Beyond suit, the anime suit, the Catwoman 70s design, Zur-En-Arrh, the new 52 Nightwing suit, and a few others you might recognise, and some you probably don't. We can see Alex Ross's Justice armour, a suit which is thankfully now available thanks to Medi's mod, which I'll link down below. We can also see a Robin design hidden in the back, and we can look at some more art for this and find it's actually a Damian Wayne suit. Obviously this doesn't mean Damian was cut from the game as a character, in the same way that having the Beyond suit doesn't mean Terry McGinnis was cut from the game. We can also see a really cool red hood design. I think this was probably cut because it does look a little odd, but honestly, I really like it. I think it's got that comic book goofiness the Arkhamverse sometimes needs. This can be seen as well as a long Halloween suit with the Arkham Origins face, presumably due to the fact the one and only time we see the long Halloween suit is in the game's DLC, and that's seemingly it for cut skins. But I also think it's worth noting how some of these suits have different body sculpts than in the final game. The Beyond suit is much skinnier, the anime suit isn't as bulky, and the Flashpoint suit is much more menacing. This was just a small observation I made, but nonetheless this is such a cool little look into what we could have had. Bane, the series' most confusing character. Is he cool or is he a mindless meathead in search of venom? Well, either way, it's clear people love him one way or another in this series. What you might not know though is where he went after Arkham City, and why he never appeared in the series after this. Well, once again, the City stories give us a definitive ending for the man who broke the bat. This comes in the City story simply titled Homecoming. 254 days, 17 hours and 9 minutes. It seemed like a lifetime, yet he still hungered, every waking moment a test of will. He'd never truly be set free from the cravings, but at least now he'd made a means to channel all that pain into something productive, something worthwhile. He'd returned to Santa Prisca broken and desperate, still reeling from his run-in with Batman in Arkham City. He was searching for solace, a fresh start, a means of making the nightmare stop. When he arrived in the slums of his homeland and found a young boy bleeding out from a gunshot wound in the street, mother wailing by his side, Bane realised what had really drawn him back there. Beneath the veneer of luxury resorts and spas, Santa Prisca was a hotbed of corruption, ruled by vicious cartels, drug lords armed up on venom, all embroiled in a bloody turf war that had claimed countless innocent lives. Bane started from the bottom and had worked his way up. Now as the sun bled out over the horizon, he admired the fruit of his labour. 12 severed heads lined up on the beach in various states of decay. The 12 most powerful drug lords on the island. His work was almost done, but just one target remained. Peña Dura, the stone fortress in which he'd been born, raised, and forever corrupted. It was time to tear it all down. I love this story. It might be one of my favourite stories in the whole franchise simply because of how much it does to make Bane a more three-dimensional character. Obviously he gets so much love in Origins, but outside of that he's kind of boring. So to have this really humanised Bane as someone who wants to fight back against his venom addiction and the oppression in his homeland is just so cool. And it really reminds me of One Bad Day Bane, which I'd recommend any Bane fan to read. Anyway, let's move on to the final segment, a new segment for the fact videos called Quickfire Factorangs. During Arkham Knight, if you move the camera, Batman's head follows it, but did you know if you press and hold A while doing this, he'll face forward again? This also works for other playable characters. Also, Batman will actually point to an enemy when activating a dual team takedown. He'll throw them and then very quickly point them out to his ally in the fight. A small but pretty cool feature not many people know about. This is a fun one too. When calling the Batmobile, if you wiggle the right stick before pressing the left bumper in to call it, this will activate a cinematic camera which you can't normally activate. Does it matter? Absolutely not. Will you ever use it? Probably not, but it is pretty cool. Finally, did you know Batman was originally supposed to have a gas mask in the game, and the original suit for the game was titled the Chem Suit? Not much is known about how this would have worked, and this obviously was written out of the game by explaining that Scarecrow's new gas would get through gas masks, but alas, it's a fun little pre-release fact.